The hottest spot in the Russian-Ukrainian war today is the Ukrainian bridgehead in Russia's Kursk region. This is reported by the New York Times, citing the opinion of Russian military personnel. Thus, the commander of a Russian Special Forces unit, who, according to him, served on 4 fronts in eastern Ukraine, considers the fighting in Kursk to be the worst. This is the most brutal fighting. I have not seen anything like it in the entire special military operation, said a Russian commander with the call sign Khades, who commands a detachment of about 200 fighters. His opinion is shared by other Russian occupiers fighting near Kursk. They are convinced that the battles will soon become even bloodier. We are expecting Bakhmut 2.0, said a Russian commander with the call sign Khades, who serves in one of the many Akhmat units, which consists mainly of remnants of the former Wagner group. Meanwhile, military analysts and relatives of Sudzha residents fear the Russians' habit of all-out bombing and Ukraine's determination to hold on to Sudzha threaten the town with a humanitarian catastrophe on a scale not seen in Russia since its invasion of Chechnya in the 1990s. However, the NYT notes that in Ukraine itself, the Russian invasion has caused civilian suffering on a much larger scale. Pasi Horoinen, a military analyst at Finnish research firm Blackbird Group, said Russia's assault on Sudzha would be costly for both soldiers and civilians, as Ukraine has deployed its best forces in the Kursk region. More than 100 Russian civilians have been evacuated to Ukraine following a deadly strike on a bomb shelter in the Ukrainian-occupied town of Sudzha in southwestern Russia's Kursk region this month, the Washington Post reported. Kyiv and Moscow have pointed fingers at each other over a February the 1st strike that killed at least 5 people and left others under the rubble of a boarding school dormitory that served as a bomb shelter and humanitarian aid hub. The attack in Sudzha took place as Russia races to retake territory that Ukrainian forces captured during a surprise cross-border incursion in August 2024. Ukraine evacuated the civilians into its northeastern Sumy region after the February the 1st attack. According to the Washington Post, the evacuation is the largest movement of Russian civilians since the incursion began. Ukraine will attempt to reach an agreement with Russia that would allow evacuees to return to Russia via neighboring Belarus. Similar agreements for smaller groups have been reached previously.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Wednesday he had spoken with U.S. President Donald Trump about opportunities to achieve peace in the war with Russia. Zelensky said in a video address that he had substantive negotiations with the United States of America and believed that America's power is enough to, together with us, together with all partners, pressure Russia and Putin towards peace. Zelensky said that he also talked with Trump about his conversation with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and that Trump talked to him about the U.S. president's conversation with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Trump, meanwhile, said his conversation with Zelensky went very well, and that a Friday meeting was being set up in Munich for talks about the war with Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I am hopeful that the results of that meeting will be positive. It is time to stop this ridiculous war, where there has been massive, and totally unnecessary, death and destruction, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Trump upended 3 years of U.S. policy toward Ukraine on Wednesday, saying that he and Russian President Vladimir Putin had agreed to begin negotiations on ending the war following a dramatic prisoner swap.
За сьогодні дуже предметні перемовини зі Сполученими Штатами Америки. Була розмова з президентом Трампом, хороша розмова, детальна. Я вдячний президенту за щирий інтерес до наших спільних можливостей, до того, як ми можемо разом наблизити справжній мир. Тривала розмова, ми обговорили багато нюансів дипломатичних, військових, економічних, і президент Трамп поінформував мене про те, що йому сказав Путін. Віримо, що сили Америки достатньо, щоб разом з нами, разом з усіма партнерами дотиснути Росію і Путіна до миру.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said NATO membership for Ukraine was unrealistic and in sweeping remarks suggested that the way forward for Ukraine was for the country to abandon hopes of a return to its pre-2014 borders and prepare for a negotiated settlement with Russia, one that should be backed up with an international force of troops. According to Associated Press, Hegseth made the comments Wednesday during the first trip to NATO and the Ukraine Defense Contact Group by a member of the new Trump administration. Allies have been waiting to hear how much continued military and financial support Washington intends to provide to Ukraine's government. What they heard was that President Donald Trump is intent on getting Europe to assume the majority of the financial and military responsibilities for the defense of Ukraine, to include a possible peacekeeping force that would not include U.S. troops and that Hegseth said should not have Article 5 protections, which could call upon the U.S. or the 31 other nations of the NATO alliance to come to the aid of those forces if they end up in contact with Russian forces. Hegseth said that Ukraine's Western backers must abandon the illusionary goal of returning the country to its pre-2014 borders, before Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula and seized parts of eastern Ukraine. Members of this contact group must meet the moment, Hegseth said to the assembled Group PF, approximately 50 member countries who have been providing support to Ukraine since Russia's 2022 invasion. "We hear you," UK Defence Secretary John Healey said in response to Hegseth's opening remarks. Both Hegseth and Healey spoke in front of the press at the top of what would be a closed-door session in Brussels to discuss future aid to Ukraine. Over nearly 3 years, around 50 countries have collectively provided Ukraine more than $126 billion in weapons and military assistance.
Hegseth, who confirmed to me this morning the US is... Friends, we meet at a moment of great consequence. 2025 is the critical year for the war in Ukraine. Ukrainians continue to fight with huge courage, military and civilians alike. Their bravery, fused with our support, has proved a lethal combination. Putin believed he would win this war in 3 days. But now, nearly 3 years on, 850,000 Russians have been killed or wounded. But while Russia is weakened, it remains undeniably dangerous and is slowly taking ground. President Trump and President Zelensky have both spoken of their desire to achieve peace through strength. And it's the commitments here through this contact group that provide the strength to achieve that peace. And our job as defense ministers is to put into the hands of the Ukrainian war fighters what they need to fight and what they need to help force Putin to the negotiating table.